Hey everyone, and welcome to the Violet Vault. Today, we're diving into something huge. We are on the verge of one of the biggest financial shifts in history, an event that's going to redraw the economic map for generations to come. So let's get right into what this all means for you.
Okay, let's just start with this number, $84 trillion. Let that sink in for a second. According to some deep dive research, that is the mind-boggling amount of wealth that's set to change hands right here in the US over just the next couple of decades. I mean, to put that into perspective, that's more than 3 times the entire economic output of the United States for a year. It's a truly staggering figure, and it shows you the sheer scale of what we are talking about.
So what is this great wealth transfer everyone's talking about? Well, put simply, it's the massive ongoing process where the baby boomer generation is passing down everything they've built up. We're talking homes, investment portfolios, family businesses, you name it, down to their heirs. And who are those heirs? For the most part, it's us, millennials and Gen Z.
Now, a transfer this massive doesn't just happen on its own. Oh no. It's all governed by a pretty complex, and this is the important part, changing set of tax laws. And you've got to understand these rules to really get the big picture.
Okay, so the main idea here is something called the gift and estate tax exemption. Think of it like a giant lifetime tax-free coupon from the government. It's a set limit on the total amount of money and assets you can give away, either while you're living or after you pass on, before the government steps in to take a slice.
So what's that limit? Well, for 2025, that number is nearly $14 million for a single person. And you have to realize this is a historically high number. We're living in a pretty unique moment that allows a really significant amount of wealth to be passed on completely tax-free.
But here's the kicker, and this is where it gets serious. What happens if you go over that limit? Well, for every single dollar you give away above that $14 million exemption, it gets hit with a whopping 40% federal tax. A 40% tax! That's why this number isn't just a number, it is an absolutely critical tool for preserving a family's wealth.
And this brings us to the most urgent part of our entire conversation today. That big, beautiful, historically high exemption? Yeah, it's not permanent. It's got an expiration date. It's part of a law that has what's called a sunset clause. And that means on January 1st, 2026, it's scheduled to be cut pretty much in half, dropping all the way down to about $7 million. The clock is ticking on this one.
Now, separate from that huge lifetime limit, there's another really cool tool that you can use every single year. It's called the annual gift exclusion. And for 2025, that amount is $19,000.
So here's how this little gem works. You can give up to 19 grand to as many people as you want. Your son, your daughter, your nephew, your best friend, every single year. And the best part? None of it even touches that big lifetime bucket we were just talking about. It's a fantastic way to pass on wealth over time without using up your main exemption.
Okay, so we've covered the rules, but what about the actual assets being passed down? For most folks, their home is their biggest asset by far. You'd think that value just transfers over nice and smooth, right? Well, some really interesting research suggests that's not always how it goes down.
Which leads us to a really important question. When we're talking about all these trillions of dollars, can we be sure that the full value is actually making it from one generation to the next? Is there a leak in the bucket somewhere? So, get this, a study from the Federal Reserve dug into home sales and they found something pretty startling. Look at this chart. In a whole lot of states, you see those dots falling below the zero line for older sellers. What the researchers found was a clear negative link between a seller's age and their return. Basically, sellers over 75 on average were getting significantly less money for their homes than younger sellers were. Crazy, right?
So why? Why is this happening? Well, the research points to a few things. First, older individuals are more likely to sell their homes as is, without doing those big, expensive renovations that fetch top dollar. They're also more likely to use something called pocket listings. That's when you sell a house privately, without putting it on the main public market, the MLS. And if you don't expose your house to all the potential buyers, you're probably not going to get the best price. And finally, they're more likely to sell directly to investors, who are, let's be honest, looking for a deal.
And see, this is exactly why careful planning is so important. So let's zoom back out and talk about the foundational legal tools people use to manage all this stuff. We're talking about wills and trusts.
All right, the classic showdown, will versus trust. What's the real difference? Well, a will only kicks in after you die, and it has to go through something called probate. That's a court process that can be long, it can be expensive, and maybe worst of all, it's a public record.
A trust, on the other hand, is live the second you create it. This lets an estate completely skip probate, which keeps the entire process private.
Now, not all trusts are the same. Let's break down the two main flavors. First, you have the revocable living trust. This is the most popular one. Think of it like a document written in pencil. It's flexible, you can change it anytime, and you stay in complete control. Then there's the irrevocable trust. This one's written in permanent marker. Once it's set up, you generally can't change it. It's a more advanced tool, used for very specific tax and asset protection strategies.
So let's bring this all back together. We've got trillions of dollars in motion, and we have a major tax law change hurtling towards us. We are truly at a unique financial crossroads right now.
I love how one estate planning attorney, Kristen Hall, put it. She said, the current high tax exemption is a use it or lose it deal. And that's exactly what it is. This is a temporary opportunity. If that extra tax-free space isn't used before the law changes at the end of 2025, it is gone for good. Poof.
So here's the bottom line, the number one thing to take away from all this. The way the tax law is set up right now has created a temporary window of opportunity. It makes getting your planning in order not just a good idea, but for some families, it's an incredibly time-sensitive mission. So I'll leave you with this final thought. As all these trillions of dollars move from one generation to the next, all under this ticking clock, it really forces us all to ask a bigger question. What does it actually mean to build a financial legacy? How will we define it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. What does legacy mean to you?
Wow, that was something, right? But don't go anywhere, there's more coming, and it's gonna make you think in a whole new way. Quick reminder, if you like learning cool stuff without the fluff, subscribe now. You won't regret it.
Welcome to the Violet Vault. You know, sometimes an event happens that's so big it draws a line in the sand, a before and an after. And in the world of global finance, a world built on rules and promises, one of those moments just happened. A $300 billion decision was made, and it may have shattered the most important thing of all, trust. Today, we're going to break down exactly what happened, why it matters to you, and how it kicked off a chain reaction that's reshaping the world's money as we speak.
And look, to kick things off, I think this quote from Dr. Rebecca Harding just absolutely nails it. She said, "This is no longer about trade, this is about the future of global power." And that's exactly right. This isn't some boring story about banking regulations. This is about the very architecture of power on a global scale. It's about who gets to make the rules, and more importantly, who has to follow them. Okay, so to really understand why this whole thing is such a seismic shock, we've got to first understand the world as it was, in the before times. And that was a world that ran on one thing, the US dollar. For decades, it's had this incredible, almost unbreakable grip on the entire global economy. Let's peel back the layers and see how that system actually works.
Now, there's a big, fancy academic term for this, monetary hegemony. But don't let the word scare you. The idea is actually super simple. It's just what happens when one country's currency, in this case, the dollar, becomes the default setting for the entire world. Think about it. When Brazil sells iron ore to China, how do they price it? In dollars. When a central bank in Japan wants to park its savings somewhere safe, it buys assets priced in dollars. This isn't just about convenience. It gives the US an unbelievable amount of structural power. It's like they own the operating system the rest of the world's economy runs on.
So how did the dollar get this powerful? Well, it basically rests on three giant pillars. First, what experts call asymmetric centrality. All that means is the dollar is at the very center of the web. Almost every major international transaction has to pass through the US financial system at some point. Second, there's its hierarchical position. For generations, US Treasury bonds have been seen as the world's #1 safe asset, the absolute safest place on planet Earth to store value. And third, you've got institutional lock-in. The whole world is just so deeply wired into the system, from trade contracts to banking software, that switching to anything else would be a logistical and financial nightmare. It's incredibly sticky.
And this is where that power gets really, really serious. It creates something called weaponized interdependence. Because if you control the plumbing, the core networks that all the money flows through, you can threaten to turn off the tap for anyone you don't like. That financial system can be turned from a tool of commerce into a tool of coercion. For the longest time, everyone knew this power existed, but it was kind of like a doomsday weapon you just hoped would never actually be used.
Until it was. The theoretical became very, very real. A line was crossed, and a single move sent a shockwave of realization through every capital city in the world. So, let's look at the specific event that lit the fuse on this whole thing.
$300 billion.
I mean, just let that number sit there for a second. It's hard to even wrap your head around. This wasn't just some company's fine or a billionaire's assets. This was the amount of Russia's central bank reserves, its national savings account essentially, that was frozen by Western nations. This was an absolutely unprecedented move against a major G20 economy. The rulebook, as everyone knew it, was just thrown out the window.
Now, it's really important we understand a key legal difference here, because the words get thrown around a lot. We're talking about freezing versus confiscating assets. When assets are frozen, access is just blocked. Think of it like someone putting a padlock on your bank account. The money is still legally yours, you just can't get to it. Confiscating, on the other hand, is permanent. That's when someone takes the money for good. Now, in this case, the assets were only frozen. By taking that step, it raised a terrifying question in every other country's mind. If they can freeze it today, could they confiscate it tomorrow? And that question is what caused the dam to break. Because when the rules you built your entire national financial strategy on suddenly seem optional, trust just evaporates. And the global reaction was swift and it was decisive.
I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a finance minister in, say, India or Saudi Arabia. Your number one job is to protect your country's wealth. For 50 years, the playbook has been simple. Buy U.S. Treasury bonds. They're safe, they're stable. But now, you're faced with a terrifying new reality. So the question becomes this: what happens when the world's safest asset is no longer considered 100% safe from political risk? Where do you go? What do you do?
And this wasn't just a theoretical debate happening in conference rooms. We saw the dominoes start to fall, and fast. In 2023, boom, China and Brazil announced they're going to settle trade in their own currencies, cutting the dollar out of the loop. A little later, Argentina, desperate to hold on to its dollars, starts paying for Chinese goods in yuan, and it just keeps accelerating. By 2024 and 2025, huge economic blocs like BRICS and the SCO are reporting that over 90% of the trade they do amongst themselves is now happening in their own local currencies. This isn't a slow drift, it's a stampede away from the dollar system. So it became obvious pretty quickly that countries weren't just going to complain about this situation. They decided to get to work. They began actively designing and building an entirely new parallel financial system, one that was designed from the ground up to operate completely outside the control of the old guard. And you can see this race to build alternatives playing out right here. For decades, everything, and I mean everything, ran on SWIFT. It's the messaging system banks use to talk to each other, and it's heavily influenced by the US and Europe. But look what's happening now. China's alternative, called CIPS, is growing incredibly fast. And then you have these really fascinating new projects like Mbridge. This isn't just one country. It's a whole group of nations and central banks working together to build a brand new platform for digital currencies that could make the old system obsolete. The best way to think about it is that they are literally building new digital plumbing for the world's money. The old pipes were controlled by one group, so they've decided to just lay a whole new set of pipes right alongside them. It's a massive technological undertaking, and the one and only goal is to create new pathways for money to flow that completely bypass the traditional choke points. But here's the thing. Building an entire new financial system, all that digital plumbing, that takes time. A lot of time. And in a world where trust was shattered overnight, nations felt like they needed a safe haven right now. And that led to the final and maybe the most fascinating part of this story: a new gold rush, a desperate flight to something permanent. And I mean, just look at this chart. The data is absolutely stunning. After that $300 billion line was crossed, central banks around the world started buying physical gold at a pace not seen in over 50 years. We're talking about a complete reversal of a decades-long trend where banks were slowly selling off their gold. This isn't just some fund manager changing their mind. This is a massive, coordinated, strategic pivot by nations to change how they store their fundamental wealth. This quote from Hugo Yatzlak just explains the mindset perfectly. When capital stops chasing yield, it runs to permanence, and permanence is gold. For years, the game was all about chasing returns, getting a little extra yield on your bonds. But suddenly, the game changed. It wasn't about profit anymore. It was about survival. It was about making sure your assets would still be there tomorrow, no matter what happened politically. The priority shifted from return on capital to the return of capital. So why gold? Why this ancient metal? Well, because in this new world of financial warfare, it's the one asset that is truly outside the system. It's seizure-resistant because you can physically hold it in a vault within your own borders. No one can freeze it with a keystroke. It's politically neutral. No single country prints it or controls it. It is, for all intents and purposes, the ultimate financial escape hatch from a system where any digital asset can be turned into a political bargaining chip.
Which brings us right back to where we are today, looking at the future. The old financial order, the one built on that fragile foundation of trust, has been fractured, maybe permanently. In its place, something new is being built. We see new digital systems coming online, and at the same time, we see a mad dash back to the oldest, most timeless asset of all. The tectonic plates of global finance are shifting under our feet. A new financial order is definitely being built. The only question left is, who's going to write the rules this time? I'd love to know what you think. What does this shift mean for the future of money? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments.
Wow, that was something, right? But don't go anywhere, there's more coming, and it's gonna make you think in a whole new way. Quick reminder, if you like learning cool stuff without the fluff, subscribe now. You won't regret it.
All right, let's talk about something that's been bubbling under the surface for years. You ever just stop and think, why is it that I can stream a movie from halfway across the world in perfect 4K instantly, but sending a little bit of money to a friend overseas feels like it's traveling by horse and buggy? Why do these giant tech companies basically own our digital identities? Well, today, we are pulling back the curtain on the technology that's aiming to fix all that. It's called blockchain, and trust me, the biggest names in finance and tech, they are paying very, very close attention. I mean, really think about it for a second. Every single time you buy your morning coffee, you like a photo on social media, you call a car to pick you up, you're not actually doing that thing directly. Nope. You're going through a gatekeeper, a bank, a social media platform, a ride-sharing company. We've basically handed over the keys to the kingdom of trust to these massive corporations. And sure, it works, kinda. But it comes with all these hidden costs that, most of the time, we don't even see.
So let's get into the internet's big flaw. See, this reliance on middlemen, it isn't just a small annoyance. It actually points to a huge, fundamental problem with how the internet was first built. It was designed to be this incredible machine for copying and moving information, but it was never, ever built to move value. You know, money, assets, things of worth, without a big, powerful company sitting in the middle to make sure nobody cheats. And that's a problem we all deal with every single day.
And here's the real kicker, what that flaw actually costs us. Because these middlemen, they're not just facilitating things, they're creating massive bottlenecks. Seriously, why on earth should it take 3 days for a stock trade to settle in this day and age? And they're expensive. They're constantly shaving a few cents, a few percentage points off of countless transactions, which adds up to billions. They build entire empires on our personal data. And maybe the worst part? This whole system just slams the door on billions of people around the world, locking them out of the global economy because it's just not profitable enough for the big banks to deal with them.
Okay, so what's the alternative? Well, what if, just imagine, what if we could build trust right into the network itself? What if we could send value to someone, anyone, anywhere in the world, just as easily and cheaply as sending an email? That right there is the revolutionary idea at the very heart of all this.
And the technology that makes this possible is the blockchain. So forget all the hype and crazy jargon for a second. The easiest way to think about it is like this. Imagine a giant digital spreadsheet, a ledger. But here's the twist. Instead of one company, like your bank, owning and controlling that spreadsheet, it's copied thousands of times and shared across a network of computers all over the world. This makes it incredibly secure and totally transparent. And here's the real magic. Trust doesn't come from some big fancy building downtown anymore. Trust is literally built into the system with math and code.
So you might be wondering, okay, if there's no boss, how does anything get done? How do they all agree? Well, it's through this really clever process called proof of work. Think of it like a huge worldwide Sudoku competition happening at lightning speed. All these computers, called miners, are racing to solve a super complex math puzzle. The first one to crack it gets to add the next block of transactions to the chain, and they get a small reward for their effort. Then, instantly, the whole rest of the network checks their work, says, yep, looks good, and the block is locked in forever. It's a brilliant system that uses self-interest and competition to create this incredibly secure, cooperative network.
This quote from Mark Andreessen, one of the guys who literally invented the first web browser, really puts it all into perspective. Just think about how different the world was before the internet. How we work, how we shop, how we connect with people. It changed everything. Well, the bet that people like him are making is that this technology is going to do the exact same thing for everything related to value, to ownership, and to trust. This isn't just about a new app, folks. This is about rebuilding the foundation.
All right, so that's the big idea, the theory. But let's bring it back down to earth. How does this trust machine actually change things in the real world, for real businesses?
Well, let's start with the biggest one of all, an industry that hasn't fundamentally changed in centuries: finance.
Just look at this comparison. It is absolutely night and day. On one side, you've got the system we have now, centralized, kind of murky, and painfully slow. I mean, 3 days for a stock trade to officially settle? On the other side, with a blockchain system, that same trade could settle in minutes. And this isn't just about being a little faster. It's about sucking out massive amounts of risk, cost, and complexity from the entire global financial system. It's a total game changer.
And believe it or not, it gets even cooler than that. Because a blockchain isn't just a database for money. It can actually run little computer programs. And this leads to one of the most powerful ideas in this whole space: smart contracts. The best way to think of it is like a super-powered vending machine. You put your money in, or it could be data, or proof you did something, and bam, the contract automatically does its thing. It could release a payment, transfer ownership of a car title, anything you can imagine, and write into code. It completely removes the need for a costly middleman to enforce the rules, because the code is the rules.
Okay, so this stuff can clearly transform big business. But honestly, for me, the most exciting part, the real revolution, is how this technology can empower regular people like you and me. It's about giving us a chance to take back control over our digital lives, control we didn't even realize we'd given away.
Just look at that number. 2.2 billion people. That's how many human beings on this planet are completely shut out from the global financial system. But with blockchain, all you need is a basic phone. No bank account needed. This is so much bigger than just banking. This is about unlocking human potential on a scale we've never seen before. It's about giving everyone a shot.
And what about our data? Right now, we're the product. But this technology could flip that whole model on its head. Imagine having your own secure private black box that holds your identity, your data, and you control the keys. When you need to prove you're over 21, you don't show your whole driver's license with your address and everything. You just reveal the one little bit of data that says yes. Instead of companies selling your data, maybe they have to pay you for it. It puts you back in the driver's seat. And this gets into some really cool futuristic stuff. We can start building a world where our devices can actually participate in the economy. Think about a self-driving car that could drop you off at work, then go earn money as a taxi while you're in the office, and then use that money to pay for its own parking and electricity. It sounds like science fiction, but it's about letting our physical world come alive and interact in a way that's totally secure and automated.
Or think about artists and musicians. This is one of my favorite examples. With a smart contract, a musician can build the rules for how they get paid directly into the music file itself. So every single time that song gets streamed or played in a movie or used in a commercial anywhere on the planet, a little micropayment could go directly to their wallet. Instantly. No more waiting 6 months for a royalty check from a giant record label. It puts the creator back in charge of their own work.
Okay, so I know this all sounds incredibly promising, maybe even a little too good to be true. And it's important that we pump the brakes for a second and be realistic. This technology is not some kind of magic wand, and like any truly disruptive idea, it has a long, tough road ahead of it, with some very real challenges.
We have to go into this with our eyes wide open. The promise is enormous, but so is the peril. You've probably heard about the massive energy consumption of some of these networks. That's a huge problem that needs to be solved. The tech itself, frankly, is still a bit clunky. It needs to prove it can handle billions of people using it every day. And there's always the big question: will the powerful companies and governments of today just find a way to take over this new technology and use it to maintain their control? These are serious hurdles, for sure, but they are challenges to be solved, not reasons to give up on the whole idea.
At the end of the day, this whole story isn't really about technology. It's not about code or computers. It's about people. It's about us. This technology is just a tool, a really powerful one. And like any tool, it can be used to build things up or to tear them down. It could help us build a more open, fair, and prosperous world for everyone. Or it could be twisted into new systems of surveillance and control. The technology doesn't get to decide. We do. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of world do we want to build with it?
Thank you for spending time with us here at the Violet Vault. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay focused and keep growing.